Welcome to the talk show Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. The goal of this show is to provide a learning experience to people of all ages, with guests from various fields in academics, a wide range of industries, and insight into the many forms of art, athletics, and entertainment. We hope you enjoy the show. Best-selling author Jonathan Eig is our special guest today. Jonathan will talk about his success as an author and his passion for researching famous people in history.
Author Jonathan Eig, welcome to Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.
Hi, Mark.
Jonathan, it's such a pleasure for me because it's rare for me to, I have some connections with some people and some things in common I find out during the interview. But you graduated from that's where I went. You graduated from Spring Valley High School. That's where my wife graduated, her brother, her sister. It's where I taught years later for well over 25 years. So it's great to have somebody from Spring Valley High School here, Rockland County, New York.
Yeah, go Tigers.
Yes, that's right. So shout out to Bill Weissman, who brought us together. I mean, one time we had a Seth Joyner Day, because Seth Joyner was a pro football player who actually went to the high school also. So
yeah, he was in my class. We graduated together. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So Jonathan, what was your high school and college experience like?
Oh, I loved Spring Valley High School. I worked at the school paper. I was the editor of the school paper. That was, a big part of but I also played on the tennis team. I played in the marching band. I played in all the bands that I could get into. I was a trumpet player. I had a lot of great friends. I'm still in touch with some of my friends from Spring Valley. And then college, I went to Northwestern again, pursuing journalism. That was the only school I applied to. And I was lucky to get in because I really wanted to do newspapers.
That's amazing. And small world, for 6 years, the teacher advisor to the newspaper, The Tiger, yours truly, Marc Hoberman. So
all right.
And hey, you're well known. You were a writer for the Tiger. The editor that I had one year was Mondaire Jones, who about 4 years ago was the first ever openly gay African-American congressman in history. He's running for Congress again. So
yeah, I know Mondaire.
He's dynamic things going on here.
Yeah, that's a proud list of former editors of the Tiger. I'm glad that Mondaire stepped into that role. That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Very small world. So so journalism, I know was kind of your thing, but writing in general, what made you realize you had a flair for writing?
Oh, I don't know. I was really bad in other subjects. Math, as Mr. Weissman could tell you, was a disaster for me. I failed it year after year, and literally failed it. And I always felt like I was more comfortable writing, that I could, I was creative. I could cover my tracks. I could make up for what I didn't know. And I loved being a newspaper reporter because I was kind of shy. So, with a notebook, I could go out and interview people. I could get up the courage to talk to them. And then I had time to write it and to, get my thoughts together and rewrite it so that I sounded smarter than I really was.
Wow, that's great. And again, so many thoughts come to mind. I had what led to this. I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years now, was I wrote a memoir when I was 54. I was diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 16 and a half. Didn't tell anyone until the book came out. But I'm not telling this just to talk about the book, but to tell you it's so interesting how certain journalists get the ideas for stories, because I think that someone from CBS Radio was doing a story in Rockland County, New York, a major story in the news. And he went to a 7-Eleven in Muncie, picked up a paper, and saw the article that featured me and the memoir. And he ended up interviewing me for CBS Radio. So I know sometimes you get told what to do, but he really would sift through other news and community events. How do you get the ideas? What you write? Are you told by the editor? Do you have any input on what it is you cover?
It depends. Obviously sometimes you're covering news and whatever happens and you go out and cover it. But I always found that if I could come up with my own ideas, I had a better chance of avoiding covering the breaking news or covering whatever your editor decides, hey, it's the first day of spring. Go out and write a story about the first day of spring. You don't want those assignments. Right. So you try to come up with your own ideas as best you can to protect yourself. And that's really, it's, that's I think the most important part of the business, and it's the most important part of writing books too, because if you have good ideas, you get to do them. If you have bad ideas, you might get to do it once, but you're not going to get to do it too often because people are going to lose interest. And in case of books, they're not going to sell. So having a good idea and being able to execute it is, I think those two things are equally important.
What are some of how did you get a job with the Wall Street Journal? I mean, this is like nothing against the Journal News, which was from Rockland County. They featured me in a couple of stories, but the Wall Street Journal is a big deal. How did that come about?
Well, I should mention that I worked for the Journal News starting when I was 16. I would call around and get the sports scores from local coaches and call them in. In the days before the internet, you had to just pick up the phone and ask the coaches who won tonight's game and get the scores, and they'd put them in the paper. So I started working there when I was 16, and then they let me come into the office and answer phones. And that's really how I started my journalism career. And then I just worked my way up, trying to get to bigger and bigger papers. My goal was always to get to the New York Times, because that's the paper that my parents read, and it was the best paper. Maybe still is. I think the Journal and the New York Times are the two best papers going right now, in my opinion. But I worked my way from the New Orleans Times-Picayune to the Dallas Morning News, and then once I got to Chicago, I began trying to apply for jobs in New York and or in bureaus and for those bigger papers. And the Wall Street Journal hired me for their Chicago bureau, even though I really didn't care much for business writing. I was more of a feature writer, but it was a good paper. I figured I'd go even if I had to do some business reporting. I'd make the best of it.
Biography writing is so much work. It's so much research. You have to know how to research, what to research, when to research. So the biography you wrote about Muhammad Ali, who, as we spoke earlier, wrong hand, is over here somewhere. There he is.
Yeah.
And so what got you, first of all, interested? I mean, people of our age and our ilk saw Ali. I mean, boxing today is not the boxing that you and I are used to. And it was like so iconic. So how did that come about?
Well, Ali was the biggest star in the world when I was a kid. He was bigger than the Pope. He was bigger than the president. I think everybody on earth knew Muhammad Ali. He was almost certainly the most famous man of the 20th century. And there had never been a complete biography when I came along and started thinking about it. And that was around like 2013 or so. I started thinking about doing an Ali book. And I really taught myself how to write a biography. It's not something I don't think they teach it in college, but I just figured it out. After, years and years of being a newspaper reporter and reading a lot of great biographies, I thought maybe I could try to write one. And my first book was a biography of Lou Gehrig. And then I just started, going from there. And by the time I got to Ali, I felt pretty confident that I knew how to do it and that it was the right time to do it. It was like 50 years since he'd won the heavyweight championship. There was still a ton of people alive who knew him, but it was enough time that you could put him in historical perspective. And I thought he needed like that big kind of almost, presidential style biography that treats him like an important historical character, not just a great athlete. So that's what I set out to do. And I had a blast working on that book. I interviewed almost everybody who knew Ali, hundreds of people. And it took me about, 4 or 5 years to write that book. But man, I had a blast working on it.
So what's the protocol involved in that? You have to reach out to certain people. You have to show credibility because so many people would want to write or interview these people. So what did Jonathan Eig do to show that credibility and go out there and get those interviews and then turn it into a biography and then turn it into a published book?
Well, that's a big question, and we get to spend a long time answering it. But
yeah.
To sum it up, you have to convince people that to trust you, and it helps that I'd written some other books and that they knew I was credible and that I was probably going to get this thing published. I wasn't just somebody aspiring to write a book out of nowhere. But also, still, you have to gain their trust. You have to convince them that you're reliable and responsible, and you're going to tell the story fairly. And in the case of Ali, he was married 4 times. He had about a dozen kids that we know about. And I had to convince all of those people from different families to trust me. And that was tricky because, the wives didn't all get along, and I wanted them all to cooperate with this book. I wanted them to know that I was not taking anybody's side, that this was not an official, licensed product of the Ali estate. It was going to be fair. It was going to be balanced. It was going to include everybody's voice. So I really stressed that, and I think that helped me gain their trust. That if I had been just working for the Ali brand, then his ex-wives might not have wanted to cooperate. But it's just you have to put in the work. You have to spend years gaining their trust. You have to really earn it. You have to show them that you're doing this right, that you're doing this fairly, that you were listening, and that you're learning. And I think it's just a matter. That's why the book takes 5 years, because you have to really develop relationships.
Oh, well, interesting, because as you said, also you have to get them to trust you. But as you said, also he was the most iconic figure. I mean, at one point they said he was the most well-known face on the planet.
Right.
So, what are some things that you can share with us that you learned? Because I've read tons of books. I mean, back in elementary school and middle school, always biographies. That was our homework assignment, our little papers we had to do. So I've read the Ali books, and I've read the actor books and all those kind of biographies. So everyone thinks they know all about Muhammad Ali. They know about his relationship with Howard Cosell. They know about so many things, about the 3 years that he lost. Look how great he was, losing the most prime athletic years of his life. But what are some things that you found out from your interviews that you didn't know and that most people probably didn't know?
Well, I learned things that Ali didn't even know about himself. I learned that his grandfather was a convicted murderer. Ali didn't know that. I learned that his great-great-great-grandfather was an escaped slave who actually helped the Confederacy during the Civil War. Helped the Union fight the Confederacy during the Civil War. I learned that he was punched 200,000 times over the course of his career. We actually counted the punches. I learned that he started suffering brain damage at the age of 31, and that he lost something like 26% of his speaking ability between the age of 31 and 40. So there are so many things that, when you have that kind of time to dive into somebody's life, that you can learn. And, I got to interview people who fought him. I got to interview people who loved him, business managers, and when time has gone by like that, when you're talking to folks who are getting up there in years, they have more perspective. I think they have more willingness to talk. His fight doctor, Ferdy Pacheco, told me that he saw signs of brain damage in Ali after the first Frazier fight, 1971. And that was just heartbreaking to me. I think that even he stuck around for another, 5 or 6 years before he refused to work with Ali anymore, trying to get him to quit. And, Ali wouldn't quit. He just believed that somehow he was going to escape the damage that boxing does to your brain. And he also needed the money. He was terrible about managing his money, just always thought there'd be more. So he just kept spending it and kept giving it away. He's very generous. But he was not really treated well by his business managers. They didn't take good care of him for the most part.
Right, and that's a story you hear all too much. But there are a lot of frightening things in what you just said, because I followed. I was a tremendous Ali fan. 31 is not only young. He wasn't working for UPS. He wasn't an accountant. He was in there fighting, getting punched more with someone who already lost some of his ability to speak and already had some type of brain damage. So that's so frightening. I didn't know that. I mean, everybody knows, that he was hurt and had some brain damage from fighting, obviously. But I don't think anybody, if we said, when did Ali first have brain damage? I don't know anyone other than you or someone who read your book who would know to say age 31, because he was fighting in his late 30s.
Yeah, he fought almost, he fought up to the age of 40, came back a couple times when he really had no right to be in the ring. And, his friends, his closest trusted business associates were all going along with it. Nobody put up a fight. Nobody said, hell no, you can't do this. I quit, except for Ferdy Pacheco. He's the only one who quit.
It's interesting. I wonder if that's because of his Hippocratic oath, because we hear these stories all too often with Michael Jackson, with Whitney Houston. There are people, Elvis Presley. I mean, there are people who know bad things are happening, but unfortunately they are kind of addicted to that gravy train. And, as the students say, mad props to Ferdy Pacheco for having his integrity and refusing to work further. So just an icon. I'm not going to say, I'd say the majority of athletes that I've seen aren't as iconic off the field, out of the ring, as he was. He was larger than life, even without the boxing. Of course, it was all under the foundation of boxing. But this is somebody funny. I mean, movies are made about him. So what obstacles? I mean, I like to talk about the story behind the glory on my show. So what obstacles, and we'll get to the next book, but what obstacles do you find in writing these books? Because it's not just you. It's not about your life. It's not a story of fiction. You could sit in a corner and write and write. You got to get out there. You got to talk to people. What are some of the obstacles that this doesn't happen overnight? 4 to 5 years may make people say, oh my goodness, but I've interviewed enough authors to hear that 4 to 5 years is kind of not a long time.
Yeah, and the Martin Luther King book took me 6 years.
Right.
So, one of the obstacles is just gaining people's trust and getting folks to talk to you, especially family members. It's very hard to talk about the flaws of your family member, your father, your spouse. Both of these guys, Ali and King, had serious issues with womanizing, and that's hard to talk about. And it's hard to think about the fact that that's going to be in a book and that people are going to read about it forever. So I have to really work hard to gain the trust of the people closest to these figures. And sometimes it's impossible. Sometimes they don't want to participate because it's just too sensitive for them. It's too hard. And I understand that, and I try to make the case that, it's important to acknowledge that they have flaws, that we're all human beings, but nobody wants to read about it. Nobody wants to, about their parents. And again, like I said, sometimes I find out things that they didn't even know. So it's a painful process sometimes. So you hope that you gain their trust, but that's probably the biggest obstacle is, gaining the trust. And also knowing that it's going to be a difficult process and that it's going to, open some wounds for some folks. So that's a challenge.
Well, I could definitely see that. There's a lot of negativity involved. And I want to talk now, of course, about the Dr. Martin Luther King book. So, you get rave reviews for your books, but I mean, Dr. Martin Luther King book has received beyond rave reviews. So what made you decide to switch? I mean, you have Ali here and Dr. King here, some similarities, many differences, but you chose Dr. King as a topic. And how did you organize all of these incredible research that was needed? Because I have to say, what I love the most is that you humanized him, because it is important to show the flaws of people, because it shows other people I can have flaws and still be great, and nobody's perfect. And how did that choice come about? And how did you organize all that massive information? You said it took 6 years.
Yeah, the choice came about because of Ali. I was working on Ali and I was asking people about Ali and King and the 2 times that they met, and I wanted to know how they got along. And as I was talking to some of those people who knew both of them, people like Dick Gregory and Harry Belafonte, Andrew Young and Jesse Jackson, I began to really get more curious about King. And these were people who really knew King well, who hung out with him, not just marched with him, but spent a long time in the car with him, went out for dinner with him, had him over to the house. These are people who knew King. And I began to think about, the idea that there wasn't going to be that much time left to interview people who knew King.
Right.
And that it might be useful to write a new book that humanized him in a way, because the national holiday that we've created and all of the celebration of his life has really watered down his story and rendered him kind of like in a 2-dimensional way, that we've lost sight of him as flesh and blood. And I wanted to see if I could do that. So I immediately, even before the Ali book was published, I began traveling around the country trying to interview as many people as I could who knew Martin Luther King. And at the same time, it occurred to me, or I realized that it had been 35 years since the last King biography had been published. So we definitely needed a new one. And that's really what motivated me, the sense that we need a new King biography every so often, at least every generation, because, his meaning changes.
Oh, I hadn't realized it was 35 years. And you make a very good point, that 2 points. One is that you're losing people who knew him because it was so long ago. And I have to tell you, as a teacher, the last 5 or 10 years, being off of Martin Luther King Day was more about the day off for some people than it was about the man.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you realized that, respected that, and wanted to change that. So what are just a couple of incredible, interesting, shocking things you found out that, look, and there's been so many movies and books and articles. What are some things that you came upon?
Well, there's so much stuff, new stuff that I learned about King, and I think some of it, was well known to scholars. The fact that he was born Mike King. He wasn't Martin Luther King when he was born. He was Mike. He was Little Mike, they called him. But I just wanted to show that he was a person, that he had mental health struggles. He attempted suicide twice as a teenager. He was hospitalized numerous times as an adult for, what he called exhaustion, but other people called depression. And other big things, not just the little personal things, but like we don't really fully appreciate just how vast the scope of the surveillance was and how determined the FBI and the federal government were to really destroy this guy. At one point, sending him a letter saying that the only way out for him was suicide, that he was going to be exposed as a fraud, that his womanizing was going to be revealed to the world if he didn't kill himself. Our government did that. And it wasn't just J. Edgar Hoover. It was a lot of other people involved, including, the president's office, including members of the media. So, I think that we need to celebrate King. The national holiday is appropriate, but we can't let that celebration distract us from how difficult his life was, how human he was, how he suffered, how he had doubts, he had failures. We have to embrace a more nuanced view of our heroes. Because I think that makes them stronger. It makes their stories more relevant.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's interesting because some of your answers really are, even though you're an author, they're very journalistic in that you want accuracy, you want the important story out there. You're very respectful of people's feelings, and you really kind of report it in that very factual way. And I have to tell you, I thought that I've read many articles. I've taught things during Black History Month. 4 of the 5 or 6 things you mentioned, I never knew. And I'm betting a lot of people didn't know it. So what's some of the feedback you're getting above and beyond the reviews? I want to know what people who contributed to the book, people who had to learn to trust you, what feedback have you been getting from those family members and friends and associates?
It's been really great. I was worried that people wouldn't want to read about the flawed King. And I've been pleasantly surprised that people have been really happy for the most part with the book. Andrew Young, who probably is the person who's still alive who knew King best, really close friend, one of his top lieutenants, traveled with him for years and years. He called me after he finished listening to the book. He listened to the audio book and he thanked me. He said, I got it exactly right. And he thanked me even for including, he said, you handled the sensitive stuff very well. That, yes, King had women. He was flawed. Dorothy Cotton, his one of his top lieutenants was also his lover. And that relationship was really important to him. And Ambassador Young thought that I got it right. And that meant a lot to me. Not everybody loved it. Jesse Jackson asked me to come and talk to him about it. And he felt like I didn't need to include all the stuff about King's sex life. Mm-hmm. And we talked about it politely. I said, I tried to keep it to a minimum. I wasn't trying to sensationalize it, but I thought it was important to show that he was the flaws, because if you don't include the flaws, people aren't going to believe the good stuff, but also because that's what the FBI used to try to destroy him. So, how do you leave that out if you want to make the bigger point that our government, weaponized King's infidelities?
Yes.
So overall, the response to the book has been great. I've been invited to speak at his college, Morehouse. I've been invited to speak at the National Cathedral. I spoke at the Apollo Theater in Harlem to a sold out crowd that my parents came along to listen to. So it's been really wonderful to see the response to the book.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. So in closing, what is next for Jonathan Eig?
Well, I'm still out there promoting the King book, and I'm working on some TV and movie things. And I've got an idea for the next book, but I can't say what it is yet until I'm really sure that I'm going to do it. Gotcha.
And I want you to come back once that book, whether we don't know the name of, once that book is out. Love you to come back. So interesting. And I have to tell you, I can't thank you enough for sharing so much of yourself, the information, and it's so personalized. And I just love the story of you speaking to Jesse Jackson. It sounds like you didn't just get it. I think it was so respectful, and you definitely earned that credibility. So I want to thank you so much, Jonathan Eig, for being on the show. I just want to say quickly to the viewers, don't forget to watch us on E360 TV, available on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. EST. Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire. Remember to follow us on social media. Life Stories with Marc Hoberman is on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Jonathan Eig, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Mark. Great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. To contact Marc, email him at info@lifestorieswithmarchoberman.com or visit him on social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.